am here to talk about my efforts to develop a map to aid in conservation efforts on Philmont. So first of all, why do I care? This picture is actually from when I hiked at Philmont in 2021. It's a scout ranch for Boy Scouts to go and hike and just enjoy being in nature for around 2 or 3 weeks. I was able to hike through burned areas in the north of Philmont and see just how vast and gigantic the impacts of the Ute Park fire were, and I wish I could have helped more. Um, when I hiked through it was a pretty bleak landscape. There were trees that were just like completely burned, no leaves, no branches, just like pins sticking out of the ground, and it was just barren. Today, I wanted to use the skills I learned in this class to make a map to help with conservation efforts in like helping rebuild after, or well, not rebuild, but um, help the environment um, restructure itself after these fires. And so I asked myself the question, how did the vegetation in the area affected by the Ute fire recover since burning? I wanted to see, I guess we can extend that question is what areas need the most help in recovery and how can we map that? Perfect. So this image is our research area. It was taken on 6/20/2018, which is exactly one day after the fire was contained. So this is about as fresh right after the fire as you can get. Nothing was regrown yet. It's located in northeastern New Mexico. You can see it in that little red dot in the northeastern part of New Mexico there. Um, we'll get to how we made this map later, actually. But one of the important things I want you to notice right now is that this green part is green still, but you can see a little bit of the fire sneaking around. So that's that will be an important fact later, but remember that this big section here was green. You can see a little better here how the fire got around. But in order to study just the area of the Ute Park fire, I found a shapefile from the official Philmont website. That was the extent of the fire. So it was an outline of how far the fire got before it was contained, which was extremely useful. So here are the images and other data that I got. In order to find the satellite imagery of the research area, these images were downloaded from earthexplorer.com, which is where the Landsat missions put all their data. And then I got a .zip from each of these and I extracted them all on my computer. So we got two images from the same day, same path, but one row different because our research area was split in half. So only half the fire was in each image. So we'll have to do something about that later, but we got two rows for each of these. You'll notice that this is a whole month later. That's because the image from earlier was like really cloudy. And so I wanted to have a better um, cloudless image that still was around the same time of the year. So I chose one that was about a month later. The New Mexico County data that we'll get to later was downloaded from the ArcGIS portal, and it was sourced from U.S. Census data. So step number one, the Philmont data that I was talking about was given to us in KMLs. So KMLs are primarily for use in Google Earth, but the biggest thing is that we are using ArcGIS, and KMLs are not really compatible with ArcGIS. So all the KML files we got, which were the Ute fire extent, the roads, and points of interest that we downloaded from Philmont, scoutranch.com, we took all of those and used the KML to shapefile tool in ArcGIS to convert them from KMLs to shapefiles. And that lets us use them in ArcGIS. Perfect. Step number two. Images imported from Earth Explorer were merged into two large images using the merge function. So you'll remember how earlier I said the fire that we wanted to study was split in half in those Landsat images. So we merged the two 2018 photos from the same day, and now it was one really long photo. And we did the exact same thing with the 2025 one, and we used the merge function on ArcGIS. Perfect. Step number three, this is a big one. So both of these images, um, The really long ones were run through the composite bands tool, and the output was a file named 2018 composite and 2025 composite. So what the composite band tool is it takes whatever bands you want together and it puts them all into one image composite. So in order to run our change detection software later, we needed to have blue, green, red, and near infrared all in one composite. So that's what we did. We took we took bands 1 through 7 and put them into one composite, or we might have just taken all of them and put them into one composite and used bands 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So now we have these composites with a lot of data in them, and one for 2018 and one for 2025. And it shows everything about them. It shows all this data. All right. Step 4. So once we made those composites, we had to put them into the change detection wizard. And what the change detection wizard is it's pretty self-explanatory. It shows what changed over time. And we set it to compare the 2018 composite to the 2025 composite. And it generated a map that showed the difference in the 4 bands that we used. That was red, green, blue, and near infrared. And so I changed the symbology of that map right after to show red meaning little to no change, um, and green to symbolize a lot of change. So green would probably be more like plants are growing back faster, and red would mean not much has grown since then, or less has grown. So step 5, next one. The U fire extent polygon, which was the KML we converted to a shape file, is we want to flip. We have this long image of what's changed, but we only need a tiny little bit of it. So we wanted to clip it to what we needed. But right now it doesn't align. And so the reason for this is because the map projections are different. The U fire extent polygon, the one that we converted from KML to shapefile, is projected onto the WGS 1984 coordinate system. And it's close, but it's not exactly the same as the WGS 1984 UTM zone 13N coordinate system. So we had to find the project tool, and we took the project tool and we put in our U-Fire extent polygon and told it to put it onto this coordinate system. And that was another thing we ran. Step 6. So now we have our accurate area for the U-Fire polygon. And so we used our clip tool and we took the big map that we had that you can see is on the left. This image is sourced from arcgis.com, by the way. We took our big image, which was the change map, and we clipped it to the size of the U-Fire extent polygon. And that cut down so that we only have what we really want to see, because we don't really care about the surrounding area, which is like a good chunk of New Mexico and I think Colorado, maybe Utah. But we don't care about that. We just want to see what's changed in our area. So we clipped it. And then finally, for our analysis, to wrap it up, we added points of interest, shape files, roads, and an outline of the U-Fire extent polygon. So the reason we added this, the points of interest and roads are unchanging. So we added that because they would be little spots of red that wouldn't really make sense for anybody looking at the map. So just adding them would cover up the red that we don't need to see. It would be confusing to have like really long lines of unchangingness on our map otherwise. And then finally, last step, the finished map was imported into a new layout with a 8.5 by 11 inch landscape letter, and we added a legend, a scale bar, and a compass rose. Now, never mind, we got 2 more steps. So that was the final thing we had to do with the change map itself. Next, we are going to make a duplicate of that, and we're going to name it the New Mexico County map, because we want to make this our inset to show everyone on the map where we are. So we took out the points of interest, roads, and the U-Fire polygon because we don't need to see them. And we set the number of colors for the change map to 1, and we set that to red. That's so that it's all just one color and it stands out easily. Um, After that, we take our county map from the ArcGIS portal, which was sourced from the census data that I talked about way earlier, and we put it and we added them together. And that made us a nice map of New Mexico with our area outlined in red. And so then we inserted that into the layout in the top right corner as an insert as an inset to show where in New Mexico we are. And then finally, our product was exported as a JPEG. And here it is. It's beautiful. So what we can see, this will be my results section as well. We can see that this red is areas that haven't changed. So that's more likely to be areas that are more like burned still or just haven't bounced back as effectively. Green is areas that have changed a lot. And so we won't really need to see them. But you'll notice this is the inset in the top right corner that I'm talking about. You can see exactly where in New Mexico we are from that little red dot. So what's I told you guys at the very beginning to remember this spot in the southeast. That's a gigantic red splotch. And so you might be thinking like, wow, we really need to focus there. But that was an area that was unburned, but it encircled with burned areas. So this area is unchanged because it didn't burn. So this is a huge outlier that we should, in next editions of the map, we should probably get rid of. But other than that, there are a few interesting spots. So out here in the middle, we can see there's a lot of red still, and that's interesting. It warrants further explanation. We can see in the southwest here, there's this area of just super no change next to the point of interests, and that's interesting. That warrants further investigation. In the northwest, we can see along the border, there's an area of like no change, but one of the biggest stretches of for sure burned land that is still red is in like the north to northeast. We can see just this stretch of just almost completely red up here. And so my recommendation would be to get a established ecologist out there to survey the land and see, do we need more work on it? All right, finally, here's our conclusions. So this map, it informs where conservation efforts should be focused. It isn't the end all be all. That's important to note. Further editions of this map could be expanded to include rivers and trails. Rivers are always changing, so that might be an interesting like line of green that stands out. Trails don't change, so that could be a little thin line of red that does stand out. Um, Elevation could be added because mountaintops don't change that much, especially above the tree line. They're always just kind of rocky, so they don't change. It could be a huge area of outlier. And this map, above all, is interesting and useful for showing possible areas of interest. Possible, emphasis on the possible, but surveying with ecologists should be paired with it. That's my number one takeaway. This map is interesting and it's useful, but it's not the end all be all. And it should be paired with human observation to decide where we need to focus our restoration efforts on. And finally, here are my references. I used Earth Explorer for my Landsat imaging. I used Philmont Scout Ranch for some of those KMLs. And I used ArcGIS Home for the counties map. Thank you.